Good evening, I'm Spencer Buckler. Coming up in a special election show, voters in Colombia didn't have to wait in long lines on election day. What poll workers had to say. And News 4 had reporters across the state yesterday, coverage from the upstate down to the low country. But first, the presidential race is still too close to call nationally. We'll get to that in just a second, but President Trump did win here in South Carolina. With 92% of the vote in, the Associated Press has called the Palmetto State for the president. President Trump has received more than 55% of the vote, while Biden got a little more than 43%. One of the president's biggest allies, Senator Lindsey Graham, also won big yesterday. With 92% of the vote in, the Republican incumbent holds an almost 11-point lead over Democratic challenger Jamie Harrison. Many considered this to be the toughest test of Graham's career, as polls showed a tight race prior to Election Day. Graham will head back to D.C. for his fourth term as South Carolina senator. And as I mentioned earlier, it's still too soon to say who will be the next president, and it's all coming down to swing states. Here breaking that down, where things stand nationally, is SGTV's Tom Santinello. Tom.
That's right, Spencer. This race is still too close to call, with a number of key battleground states still up for grabs. Two of the big ones of particular interest are Nevada out west and Pennsylvania in the northeast. Pennsylvania is going to be crucial to President Trump's re-election. He carried that state back in 2016 along with North Carolina and Georgia down south, and he's going to need to win them and hope for some luck out in Nevada right now, because if the polls hold, Joe Biden is looking like our next president by a very slim margin of 270 to 268. The polls are very close, especially out in Nevada, Pennsylvania. Like we said, Georgia, North Carolina, always too close to call a few days after the election. But this one really shaped to be something special, Spencer. And if we look at in Pennsylvania, President Trump does have a comfortable lead, but the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania thinks that as more absentee ballots come in, this race is going to get closer and closer. Joe Biden has been closing that lead steadily throughout the day as more mail-in ballots have been counted. So really, it's anyone's guess at this moment.
And President Trump's still in the lead there in Pennsylvania, but it's a different story over in Nevada, right?
That's right. This one incredibly close. Joe Biden up by less than 1 percentage point. 75% reported as of 5:30 this afternoon. Joe Biden wins that state. He's our next president. But as we've said, anything can happen. Very close, and there's still more states to be counted.
Another state that's super close, Georgia, right to the west of us.
That's right, Spencer. Our neighbor to the west, Georgia, right now in favor of President Trump. But as more ballots come in, that's been the theme of this election, absentee ballots, mail-in ballots. The longer those take to count, the more it seems like it's in Joe Biden's favor, especially here in Atlanta, a place where Democrats always do well. The big cities are blue places. They always do well for Democrats. If Joe Biden wants to win this election in not a landslide, but without a doubt, he's going to need to hope that those absentee ballots bring him out on top.
Well, Tom, thank you. A lot to follow, and you're doing a great job. Well, the election may not be over, but that hasn't stopped Donald Trump from taking legal action in 3 key battleground states. The Trump campaign is suing to overturn the decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to allow absentee ballots postmarked on November 3rd to be counted until Friday. The campaign has also demanded a recount in Wisconsin, despite the state's governor, Scott Walker, implying that Joe Biden's lead was too large to warrant such action. As of right now, Biden has a 20,000 vote lead in the state. In Michigan, the Trump campaign is suing on grounds that it was not able to properly observe ballot counting in the state. Poll observers for the Trump campaign want to halt the counting of votes in Michigan until they are granted meaningful access to counting locations across the state. The campaign also demands to review all absentee ballots which were opened and counted in the state that were not observed by the Trump campaign. After the break, News 4's statewide coverage of Election Day and how many voters turned out here in Columbia.
All flags, including the one at the South Carolina State House, will be flown at half-staff until...
The alumni help inform South Carolina legislators about the many ways that USC benefits
Baseball has started off their 2020 campaign 4-0 after sweeping Holy Cross,
South Carolina at the Carolina State Fair. It is the national and international...
13 cases of infected people in the U.S., but experts here at USC say there is no reason...
Tonight is doing their comedy sketches. That's another branch of SGTV. It's a big deal. It's going to be
60 again, but those showers are showing up. Tuesday will be 68th Super Bowl in 50 years. They took down the San Francisco 49ers 31.
First Filipinos in California in October of 1583.
Good evening, I'm Spencer Buckler. Coming up tonight, for years, the minimum age to tomorrow, the World Health Organization, there have been a reported 916 flu.
A study from the National Academy of Medicine
Sam
states
Turley and staffers here at the Big
many members of the Carolina community.
Hip Hop Wednesday is a culture phenomenon here at the University.
In-person absentee voting shattered state turnout records, but it was a different story on Election Day. SGTV's Carlin has more on what left poll workers surprised yesterday.
I definitely expected there to be a lot more people just throughout the day. I did expect there to be a constant line, which there hasn't been.
Low voter turnout, inconsistent lines, and poll workers standing idle throughout Columbia as polls opened for general election day.
We had a little rush at the beginning, maybe 45 minutes or so. Maybe the line was 30 minutes, 20 minutes. But since 8:15 or so, it's been pretty much walk up and vote.
With absentee and in-person ballots, early voting has reached a record high, what some attribute to unexpectedly low lines.
But when I early voted, there was a much longer line than I even saw here.
Despite having lower lines, polling locations in Columbia still ran throughout the day, many utilizing curbside voting to make them more accessible.
And voting should be open to everyone, even if it's not easy for a voter to access the polls.
Irmo Mayor Barry Walker made sure that his citizens would be able to vote today, driving those who could not bring themselves.
People know that I want people to vote. I put out a little post on my Facebook page. If they need a ride to the polls, to give me a call.
Others, like members of the women's basketball team, stopped by polling locations to help workers and encourage voters.
We've gone around to a couple different locations, and we're just giving out some snacks and some drinks so that people are hydrated and just to kind of congratulate them on voting.
No matter the results, officials in Columbia say they are proud of this year's overall voter participation.
Normally where we have maybe 1,000 people voting here, we're probably going to have 1,500 to 2,000. So it's been significant, and I'm happy to see that participation.
For SGTV News 4, I'm Carlin.
Thank you. Control of the Congress was also at stake yesterday. The Republican Party currently holds 48 seats in the Senate, with the Democratic Party claiming 45 seats. 2 Senate races have yet to be called, and another in Georgia is headed for a January runoff. While the Republicans will likely maintain their advantage in the Senate, the Democrats are expected to maintain their advantage in the House of Representatives, despite losing seats on election night. The Democrats currently hold a 15-seat advantage in the House, with 44 races yet to still be decided. And finally tonight, SGTV News 4 was spread out across the state yesterday covering the election. Our news team has Election Day reports from all over South Carolina.
I look at it as something that my mom always, even when she was wheelchair bound with her legs amputated, she utilized her right to vote, and I utilized my right to vote. Even though today was a busy day, I could have done early voting, but I have this thing about voting on voting day.
It's November 3rd, which means 2020 Election Day is finally upon us. Voters all across South Carolina are making their way to the polls to make sure their voices are being heard. News 4 reporters are stationed all across the state to give us the updates on different polling locations and voter turnout.
I'm Carlin in Columbia at the most immediate polling location to the USC campus, where there's actually little to no line behind me here. Now we will see if this trend is consistent throughout the state. But first, let's go check in on Kendall over in Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Finn. I'm Kendall Smith here in Union County, North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte at the Weddington Elementary School gym precinct, where the lines have not been particularly long here on Election Day. To some of the poll volunteers here, they said that early voting lines here in Union County were much longer than what they are seeing today on Election Day. Both of the candidates are hoping to take home a big-time victory in the Tar Heel State. I'm Kendall Smith here in Union County, North Carolina. We're going to send it over now to Caiden Dinkins in Charleston, South Carolina with more. Caiden, what's going on in the Low Country?
Thanks, Kendall. I'm Caiden Dinkins at James Island Charter High School in Charleston, South Carolina, where there is virtually no line at all, and it is taking voters only about 15 minutes to get in and out of the polling site. The lines may be short, but that hasn't stopped voters of all age demographics from coming out and making their voices heard. Many first-time voters are certainly excited at the chance.
Because this is the world that we're growing up in, and this is one of the first years that a lot of
us get to actually have a say in what's going on around us. So it's important for us to exercise our right.
Now let's check in with Lydia Blackstone in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Caiden, I'm a lot further upstate. I'm in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where today there is basically no line. Talking to voters here today, they waited for maybe 5 minutes, got their vote in, and left. There's a lot of excitement here about tonight's election. And so I want to see what's going on in Fort Mill. Frank?
Thank you, Lydia. I am Frank Martinez, and I am in Fort Mill, South Carolina at the York County District Office, one of the many voting places here. And as you guys can see, the line is non-existent right now. From early morning to about 1 or 2 p.m., the line was pretty constant, but now at 3 p.m. it has died down. Now let's go back to Columbia with Sloane to see what's happening.
Thanks, Frank. I'm here at the West Columbia precinct polling location, where as you can see, there is little to no line behind me because so many of Columbia's registered voters have already cast their votes through early voting and absentee ballots. Make sure to keep up with us for all of your election updates. Closing our statewide election coverage, I'm Sloane O'Cone, SGTV News 4.
Well, that does it for weekly news from all of us at SGTV News 4. Stay safe out there and have a good night.